Amora sat on a wooden bench under a mango tree, scrolling through her phone. Her face glistened with a touch of powder, and her perfectly styled hair spoke of a woman who valued class and attention. Beside her, Ngozi, her childhood friend and now her closest confidant, sipped a chilled drink from a plastic cup, her eyes darting toward the rusty gate every few seconds. Amora was distracted, half listening to Ngozi, who was busy talking about life in the city and the kind of men they deserved. To Ngozi, life was too short to waste on broke men. Her words dripped with scorn for poverty, as though being poor was a curse that no amount of love could cure. Then the creaking sound of the old gate filled the air. Amora looked up and froze for a moment. There he was, David, walking in with his usual quiet demeanor. He wore a plain white shirt tucked into a pair of faded jeans. His shoes were clean but old, and in his hands, he held a small bouquet of fresh flowers tied with a piece of red ribbon. In his other hand was a small nylon bag, its content hidden, but clearly a humble gift. As David walked toward her, Amora's heart skipped, but not with excitement, rather with dread. She glanced at Ngozi, who smirked and whispered something under her breath, making Amora's cheeks flush with embarrassment. David's steps were slow and steady, and though his face carried a warm smile, there was an innocence about him that Amora suddenly found irritating in that moment. David reached them and greeted respectfully, bowing slightly as tradition demanded. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight of sincerity that made the mocking smirk on Ngozi's lips all the more cruel. Amora shifted uncomfortably on the bench, pretending to adjust her hair while Ngozi folded her arms, glaring at David with open disdain. Before Amora could say a word, the front door burst open, and Mama Amora stepped out. She was a woman in her mid-50s, wearing a worn-out wrapper tied loosely over her chest. Her sharp eyes scanned David from head to toe like a soldier inspecting a recruit. Her lips curled in irritation the moment she saw the flowers in his hand. She walked toward them briskly, her bare feet slapping against the cement floor with each step. The air grew tense. Neighbors peeked from their windows, sensing drama was about to unfold. Mama Amora stopped in front of David, her arms akimbo, her wrapper slightly loose as she tightened it with a sharp tug. She didn't need to speak for everyone to know she was not pleased. Her entire body language screamed disapproval and disgust. The confrontation began. She made no attempt to hide her contempt for David. To her, a man without money was as good as dead. She questioned his intentions, mocked his appearance, and ridiculed the small bouquet he held as though it were an insult to her family. Her voice rose with every word, sharp enough to cut through David's pride. Amora sat frozen, her heart pounding, torn between defending the man she once claimed to love and avoiding her mother's wrath. She stared at David, her lips trembling, but the words never came. Ngozi, on the other hand, was enjoying every moment, whispering poison into Amora's ears and laughing at David's humiliation. David stood silently through it all. His calmness was unsettling, almost regal. He didn't fight back. He didn't raise his voice. He simply lowered his gaze, his fingers tightening around the bouquet as if holding on to his last piece of hope. When it became clear that nothing he said could change their minds, David stepped back slowly. His heart was heavy, but his face remained expressionless, save for the faint flicker of pain in his eyes. As he turned to leave, the last rays of the sun bathed his figure in golden light, creating a haunting image. A man walking away from love, dignity intact, but soul shattered. No one knew the thoughts running through his mind. No one guessed the storm that brewed behind his silence. As the gate creaked shut behind him, a cold wind swept through the compound, rustling the mango leaves as if nature itself disapproved of what had just happened. Amora sat motionless, clutching her phone, pretending to scroll while her thoughts screamed louder than the voices around her. In a fancy restaurant buzzed with soft music and the quiet chatter of well-dressed patrons. The air smelled of expensive wine and roasted steak. This was not David's usual place. He had saved for weeks, sacrificing every little comfort, just to afford a table here. He wanted everything to be perfect. David sat at a corner table, nervously adjusting his simple shirt and black trousers. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket to check the small velvet box for the 10th time. Inside was a modest silver ring, far from flashy, but bought with genuine love and sacrifice. Tonight, he would ask Amora to be his wife. When Amora arrived, all eyes turned. She was breathtaking. Her shimmering gold dress hugged her curves, her heels clicked against the polished marble floor, and her hair flowed down like a waterfall. She looked like a queen walking into a royal banquet. For a moment, David forgot his fears and smiled as she approached. But Amora's smile was thin, forced, almost irritated. She sat down without enthusiasm, her eyes darting across the restaurant as if searching for something, or someone, better. In her mind, the evening already felt like a waste of time. David, however, didn't notice. His heart was pounding too hard. He stood up nervously, cleared his throat, and slowly knelt on one knee in front of her. The room grew quiet. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Every pair of eyes in the restaurant locked on them. David opened the small box, revealing the ring that cost him more than he could afford. He looked up at her with trembling hope. His face glowed with sincerity, his voice breaking as he spoke words from the deepest part of his soul. But those words never reached her heart. Amora's face twisted in shock, then in anger. Her eyes widened, not from joy but from pure humiliation. She looked around at the curious strangers watching. A poor man proposing to her? In public? How dare he embarrass her like this? Her chest burned with rage. Then it happened, the moment that would scar David forever. Amora stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched across the floor. Without warning, her palm landed hard across David's cheek. The sharp sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Gasps filled the air. A waiter froze mid-step, holding a tray. A woman at another table covered her mouth in shock. David's head turned slightly from the slap, but he didn't fall. He just stayed there on his knees, staring at the floor as the pain on his cheek burned deeper than the shame in his heart. Amora wasn't done. She hissed loudly, her words dripping with venom, humiliating him in front of strangers. She called him a failure, a disgrace, a man with no future. She mocked his cheap ring, his cheap life, and his cheap dreams. Every word was a dagger to David's soul. The room fell silent again as David slowly rose to his feet. He closed the ring box, slid it back into his pocket, and looked at her one last time. There was no anger in his eyes, only a calmness that seemed almost frightening. It was the calm of a man who had reached the end of his patience, the calm before a storm no one could see coming. Without a word, he turned and walked out, leaving whispers and stares behind. Amora stood trembling with fury and embarrassment, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling like a drumbeat of pride. But before the shame could sink in, another sound filled the air, the deep roar of an expensive car engine outside. Heads turned toward the entrance as a tall, broad-shouldered man walked in wearing a designer suit that glittered under the chandelier. Checker. He was the kind of man that turned heads and made jaws drop. His watch alone was worth more than David's entire savings. He walked straight to Amora, kissed her cheek boldly, and dropped a stack of cash on the table like a trophy. The tension in the room shifted instantly. The whispers changed from pity to envy. Some guests even clapped lightly as if rewarding Amora for upgrading her life in a single moment. Chaka held her close, promising a life of luxury, a life Amora had always dreamed of. Mama Amora joined them later, practically dancing with joy as she called Chaka her future son-in-law. The humiliation of David was forgotten, replaced by the pride of catching a rich man. But outside, under the dark night sky, David walked alone. His face was unreadable, his heart shattered, yet behind that silence was a fire burning hotter than ever. He had lost Amora, not to love, but to greed. The night of the engagement party arrived like a festival. The compound Checker rented was transformed into a glittering paradise, drenched in colorful lights that shimmered against the dark sky. Expensive cars lined the street, their metallic bodies gleaming under the floodlights. A massive banner stretched across the gate, "Congratulations Amora and Chaka," in bold gold letters. Inside, the party was in full swing. Loud Afrobeat music pumped through giant speakers, shaking the ground with every beat. Women in glamorous lace gowns swayed their hips to the rhythm, their necks heavy with gold. Men strutted in tailored suits, sipping from crystal glasses of champagne. The scent of grilled meat, expensive perfume, and fresh flowers mingled in the air, creating an intoxicating aroma of wealth and celebration. Amora sat at the center of it all like a queen on her throne. Her shimmering red gown clung to her like a second skin, her diamond earrings catching every flicker of light. Her skin glowed with pride as guests showered her with praises. Cameras flashed, capturing her smile, a smile that hid a whisper of guilt deep inside her heart. For a brief second, as she sipped her wine, David's calm face flashed in her mind. She pushed it away quickly. Tonight was about status, about power, about winning in life. Mama Amora was the star of the evening in her own right. Her laughter echoed across the compound as she moved from table to table, boasting about her daughter's good fortune. Every word she spoke dripped with pride, each sentence a dagger aimed at those who had mocked her in the past. "My daughter has finally escaped poverty," she said, loud enough for the whole world to hear. Ngozi, dressed in a tight gold dress, stayed glued to Amora's side, her phone constantly snapping pictures for social media. Each post carried captions dripping with mockery for the poor. Level Don change. No broke boys allowed. The likes and comments rolled in like waves, feeding her vanity. Meanwhile, Chaka was in his element. He moved around like a king, greeting guests with his chest high, his expensive wristwatch glittering like a crown jewel. Every handshake was a performance, every smile a mask. He spent money like water, spraying bundles of cash in the air as the DJ shouted his name. People hailed him, chanting praise like he was royalty. But behind that confident smile was a storm brewing, a secret he fought desperately to hide. Chaka was drowning in debt. The flashy cars were borrowed, the designer clothes bought on credit, and the bundles of cash sprayed that night belonged to men who wanted their money back soon. His entire empire was a castle built on sand, and the tide was rising fast. In a corner of the compound, away from the blinding lights and noisy music, two men stood watching. One of them, a rough-looking man with a scar across his cheek, leaned closer to Chaka as he pretended to greet him. His voice was low, but the urgency in it was sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Boss, the people you owe are getting restless. If they don't see their money soon, they'll come here. And trust me, you don't want that." Chaka's fake smile didn't falter, but his heart thudded like a drum. He whispered through clenched teeth, dismissing the man with a nod before turning back to his guests. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Amora, who was laughing with Ngozi. For a brief moment, his expression darkened. He needed this wedding to happen, fast. If not, everything would collapse like a house of cards. As the night deepened, the music grew louder, the drinks flowed like rivers, and the dancing intensified. No one noticed the shadows creeping closer to Chaka's world of lies. No one saw the cracks forming in his golden life. And certainly, no one guessed that this grand celebration would soon turn into the biggest humiliation of all. Far away from the noise and laughter, David sat in silence in his father's study, staring at the flames in the fireplace. His face was calm, but his eyes held a storm. His father, Mr. Patrick, an imposing man with the aura of wealth and power, sat across from him, watching silently. They didn't need words. Both men knew what needed to be done. The wedding day dawned like a royal festival. The air shimmered with excitement as the grand church glittered under golden decorations and cascades of fresh white roses. Inside, the sweet scent of incense mingled with perfume as guests in their finest attire filled every pew, whispering and snapping pictures. The choir's soft harmonies floated like silk through the vast hall, setting the perfect stage for what everyone believed would be a fairy-tale union. Amora was the star of the day. Draped in a breathtaking gown of flowing satin and lace, she walked down the aisle like a goddess descending from heaven. Each step was a proclamation of triumph. Her diamond-studded tiara sparkled like the morning sun, and pride danced in her eyes. This was the moment she had dreamt of, escaping the clutches of poverty forever. Chaka stood at the altar in a white designer suit, his smile broad but nervous. Cameras flashed as his friends cheered from the front row, the envy of many in their eyes. He adjusted his cufflinks for the 10th time, trying to calm the storm raging in his chest. The debts, the lies, the threats, he pushed them aside. Today, nothing could ruin his perfect image. The officiating minister raised his voice, his tone solemn yet filled with joy. "We are gathered here today to join these two in holy matrimony." His words rolled like thunder through the hall. Just as the vows were about to be spoken, a sudden blare of car horns shattered the serene moment. 1, 2, then a chorus of honks, deep and commanding, echoing from outside the church. Heads turned in confusion. Murmurs rose like a tide as curiosity swept through the congregation. Then came the roar of engines. Through the wide-open church doors, a fleet of black, gleaming luxury SUVs rolled in like a procession of kings. The cars halted with military precision, and the heavy doors swung open in unison. From the lead car stepped David, no longer the humble, quiet man Amora once mocked. He was a vision of power and grace in a tailored Italian suit, his wrist glinting with a timepiece worth more than the entire wedding decor. Behind him trailed his bodyguards, towering men in black, their presence commanding instant silence. And then the real shock. A distinguished older man emerged from the second car. His aura was magnetic, his authority undeniable. It was Mr. Patrick, one of the most powerful business moguls in the country, a name that opened doors and silenced kings. The whispers became a roar. "Is that Mr. Patrick? The billionaire? What is happening?" The atmosphere shifted like a storm rolling in. The air grew thick with tension, eyes darting between Amora and David, whose calm yet piercing gaze locked on her like a blade. David walked slowly down the aisle, every step a revelation, every stride echoing the sound of broken pride. When he reached the altar, he didn't smile. His voice was calm, almost cold, but it carried the weight of 1,000 storms. "You rejected me because I had nothing, or so you thought." The room froze. Amora's knees trembled as reality crashed into her like a tidal wave. The truth unfolded mercilessly. David was not a struggling man. He was the only son of Mr. Patrick, heir to an empire of unimaginable wealth. His so-called poverty had been a test of love, loyalty, and character. And Amora had failed. Before the gasps could settle, another storm hit. 2 uniformed police officers marched into the church, their boots clicking against the marble floor. They went straight to Chaka. The color drained from his face as they clasped handcuffs on his wrists. "Chaka Obi, you are under arrest for fraud, criminal impersonation, and outstanding debts. You have the right to remain silent." The crowd erupted into chaos. Phones flashed, recording the spectacle. Guests whispered furiously. "Fraud? Debts? This can't be real." Chaka struggled, his perfect smile shattered into desperation. "Please, let me explain." But his words drowned in the ocean of murmurs and contempt. Amora stood rooted to the spot, her world crumbling like a fragile glass tower. Her mother clutched her arm, trembling, speechless for the first time in her life. All the pride, all the boasting, all the dreams, they lay in ruins at their feet. David didn't wait for excuses. He turned, his father following, their presence like a royal decree of judgment. As the convoy of cars disappeared into the horizon, silence swallowed the church, broken only by Amora's sobs echoing in the hollow walls of a dream gone wrong. The wedding dissolved into chaos, leaving whispers and gasps echoing through the church walls. Outside, the sky darkened as if mourning with her. Amora stumbled barefoot across the gravel, her white gown stained and torn, chasing after David with tears streaming down her face. "David, please," she cried, her voice breaking with desperation. "I still love you. I was wrong. Please forgive me." But David stood firm beside his sleek black convoy, his face like stone. He turned slowly, his eyes burning with the weight of betrayal. "Love?" he scoffed, his voice sharp as a blade. "Where was this love when you humiliated me? When you threw me away for wealth and status? You made your choice, Amora, and now I've made mine." She reached for him, trembling, but his bodyguards stepped between them. Without another glance, David slid into the back seat. The engines roared to life, and in seconds, the convoy sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and a broken heart behind. Cheka, once her knight in shining armor, was dragged away in handcuffs, his struggles and curses drowned out by the flashing cameras. Her mother, who had once raised her head high with pride, now stood frozen in disgrace, unable to meet the eyes of the crowd. As the luxury cars vanished down the road, Amora collapsed to her knees, her sobs shaking the earth beneath her. It was then, in the bitter silence, that she understood the cruel truth. True love had slipped through her fingers, not because of fate, but because of her own greed and pride.